There is a question at the center of modern geopolitics that refuses to go away, no matter how much leaders try to manage it quietly. China has firm control over Xinjiang. It has ruled Tibet for decades. It absorbed Hong Kong and dismantled its autonomy with little hesitation. Yet there is one place, a small island just 180 kilometers off China's coast, that Beijing has repeatedly signaled it would risk everything to reclaim. Not sanctions, not economic isolation, not even the possibility of war with the United States has stopped China from drawing a hard line over Taiwan. This is what makes Taiwan different from every other territory China claims. Taiwan is not just land. It is the one unresolved outcome of the Chinese Civil War, the physical reminder that China's revolution was never fully completed. For Beijing, Taiwan represents a living contradiction. A Chinese society that exists outside Communist Party control, protected by foreign power, prosperous, democratic, and increasingly distant in identity from the mainland. Every year, Taiwan remains separate. It quietly undermines the story the Chinese state tells about itself, a story built on reunification, sovereignty, and the end of humiliation by outside forces. This is why Taiwan cannot be compared to Xinjiang, Tibet, or Hong Kong. Those were internal problems Beijing could suppress with force and time. Taiwan is different. It has its own government, its own military, its own global role, and powerful allies willing to intervene. Understanding why Taiwan matters more to China than any other territory requires looking beyond maps and borders. It requires understanding history, legitimacy, military geography, global technology, and the fears that shape decision-making in Beijing today. And once those pieces come together, it becomes clear why Taiwan is not just a regional dispute, but the most dangerous flashpoint in the world. Taiwan's importance begins with a moment that Beijing has never been able to move past, the ending of the Chinese Civil War in 1949. When Mao Zedong proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China in Beijing, it was presented as the final chapter of a long national struggle, the moment China stood up after a century of invasion, fragmentation, and humiliation. But the reality was far messier. Across the Taiwan Strait, Chiang Kai-shek and the remnants of the nationalist government did not surrender. They fled to Taiwan with nearly 2 million soldiers, officials, intellectuals, and vast reserves of gold and cultural assets. And there they rebuilt a rival state that claimed to be the legitimate government of all China. From Beijing's perspective, this was not a foreign country breaking away, but an enemy regime surviving just offshore under the protection of the United States. The war was not truly over. It was frozen. This unresolved ending is critical to understanding why Taiwan is different from every other territorial issue China faces. Xinjiang and Tibet were absorbed by force. Hong Kong was returned through negotiation and later brought firmly under control. Taiwan, by contrast, represents a defeat that was never corrected. The Communist Party won on the mainland but failed to finish the job. For decades, American military intervention made that failure permanent, turning Taiwan into a protected space where the losing side of the Civil War did not just survive, but eventually thrived. In Beijing's historical memory, this is intolerable. Taiwan is not merely a breakaway province. It is the last living remnant of an unfinished revolution. Its existence challenges the idea that the Communist Party completed China's reunification and restored full sovereignty. Every map that shows Taiwan outside Beijing's control is a reminder that the Civil War ended without closure. This is why Chinese leaders do not speak about Taiwan in the same language they use for other regions. Taiwan is framed as a question of national destiny, not administration. As long as Taiwan remains separate, the Communist Party's victory in 1949 looks incomplete, and for a regime that bases its legitimacy on historical triumph and national unity, an unfinished war is not a problem that can simply be ignored or managed over time. For the Chinese Communist Party, Taiwan is not just a territorial dispute left over from history, it is a direct threat to the foundation of its political legitimacy. Since 1949, the party has justified its rule through a single overarching narrative. It ended the century of humiliation, expelled foreign influence, reunified the country, and restored China's rightful place in the world. This story is repeated in textbooks, speeches, museums, and national holidays. It is the moral contract between the party and the population. Taiwan quietly breaks that contract. As long as Taiwan exists outside Beijing's control, it exposes a flaw in the claim that reunification was ever fully achieved. This is why Taiwan is far more dangerous to the party than Xinjiang, Tibet, or Hong Kong. Those regions are governed through force and surveillance, but they do not offer an alternative model of Chinese governance. Taiwan does. It is a Chinese society that developed without Communist Party rule and succeeded anyway. It has elections, opposition parties, an independent media, a professional military, and a passport recognized around the world. For Beijing, this creates a problem that cannot be solved with repression alone. If Taiwan is allowed to remain separate indefinitely, it raises an implicit and deeply uncomfortable question for people on the mainland. If Chinese people can govern themselves, grow wealthy, and remain culturally Chinese without the party, then what exactly makes the party indispensable? That question is far more dangerous than separatist movements that lack power or legitimacy. It strikes at the core of the regime's self-image. This is why every Chinese leader since Mao has insisted that Taiwan must eventually return, but why the pressure has intensified under Xi Jinping. Xi has tied reunification directly to what he calls the Great Rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. So, by doing so, he has transformed Taiwan from a long-term objective into a personal and institutional test. Failure no longer looks like patience. It looks like weakness. If Taiwan were ever to formally declare independence and Beijing failed to respond, the damage would not be limited to foreign policy. It would echo internally, undermining the party's claim that it alone can protect China's unity and dignity. In authoritarian systems, legitimacy is not flexible. It must be constantly reinforced. Taiwan threatens that reinforcement by existing as proof that the revolution of 1949 did not resolve everything it promised to resolve, and that makes it a problem Beijing cannot simply tolerate forever. Taiwan's significance deepens further when geography enters the equation, because beyond history and legitimacy, the island occupies a position that directly constrains China's rise as a true great power. Look at a map of East Asia, and Taiwan immediately stands out, sitting like a barrier just off China's southeastern coast. Military planners refer to this barrier as the first island chain, a line of islands stretching from Japan through Taiwan and down to the Philippines. For Beijing, this chain functions like a strategic wall. As long as Taiwan remains outside Chinese control, China's navy is effectively boxed in. Its submarines, surface fleets, and aircraft must pass through narrow straits that are heavily monitored by the United States and its allies. In any serious conflict, these choke points would become deadly bottlenecks, limiting China's ability to project power into the wider Pacific. This is not an abstract concern. China's leadership understands that global power status is inseparable from naval freedom of movement. The United States dominates not because of land borders, but because its navy can operate freely across the world's oceans. As long as Taiwan sits in the middle of the first island chain, China remains a continental power constrained to its near seas, no matter how many ships it builds. From Beijing's perspective, this is unacceptable. Taiwan is not simply adjacent territory. It is the key that unlocks access to the Pacific. Without it, China's ambitions to protect sea lanes, secure energy supplies, and challenge American naval dominance remain permanently limited. This is why Chinese military exercises around Taiwan have intensified over the years, rehearsing blockades, encirclement, and amphibious operations. They are not just demonstrations of force aimed at Taipei, but signals to Washington that China views Taiwan as a strategic linchpin, not a negotiable issue. Control of Taiwan would fundamentally alter the balance of power in East Asia, pushing the first island chain outward and forcing the United States and its allies to rethink their entire regional posture. In that sense, Taiwan is less an island than a lever. Whoever controls it gains strategic depth. Whoever loses it accepts long-term vulnerability. For Beijing, allowing Taiwan to remain outside its control means accepting permanent strategic confinement, something no rising power in history has ever willingly done. Taiwan's importance reaches a global scale once technology and the United States enter the picture, because the island is not only a strategic choke point, but also the nerve center of the modern digital economy. At the heart of this is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, better known as TSMC, a company that quietly produces the vast majority of the world's most advanced computer chips. These are not consumer luxuries. They are the core components of artificial intelligence systems, advanced weapons, satellites, data centers, automobiles, and virtually every device that powers modern life. No other country can currently replace this capacity at scale. This creates a paradox that shapes every decision in Beijing and Washington. China needs access to these chips to modernize its military and economy. Yet any attempt to seize Taiwan by force risks destroying the very factories China would be trying to control. At the same time, the centrality of TSMC is precisely what makes the United States unwilling to walk away. For Washington, Taiwan is not just a democratic partner or a symbolic stand against coercion. It is a critical pillar of global technological stability. If China were to gain control over Taiwan's semiconductor industry, Beijing would hold unprecedented leverage over global supply chains, Western militaries, and advanced industries. This is why Taiwan has become inseparable from American credibility in Asia. Allies like Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines watch Taiwan closely because if the United States cannot protect an island so central to its interests, the reliability of every other security commitment comes into question. To manage this risk without triggering war, Washington has relied on a fragile strategy known as strategic ambiguity. Officially, the United States recognizes one China, but in practice it arms Taiwan, trains with regional allies, and signals that any forced change to the status quo would be unacceptable. The ambiguity is deliberate. If Beijing knew for certain that the United States would fight, war could become inevitable. If Beijing believed the United States would never intervene, invasion would become tempting. By keeping both possibilities alive, Washington hopes to deter action on all sides. But this balance is inherently unstable. It depends on perception, credibility, and restraint, not treaties or guarantees. A single miscalculation, a moment when one side believes the other is bluffing, could collapse the entire framework. That is what makes Taiwan so dangerous. It sits at the intersection of history, military strategy, economic survival, and great power rivalry. Any move toward Taiwan is no longer a regional decision. It is a decision that would reverberate through the global economy and potentially pull the world's two most powerful states into direct confrontation. Taiwan stands apart from every other contested region in China because it combines three elements that Beijing cannot neutralize with force alone: political legitimacy, foreign protection, and visible success. Xinjiang and Tibet are tightly controlled territories where dissent is suppressed through surveillance, security forces, and time. Hong Kong, despite its unique history, was ultimately brought to heel through legal and police mechanisms once Beijing decided the cost of restraint outweighed the benefits. None of these places offer a competing vision of Chinese governance with real power behind it. Taiwan does. It is not a protest movement, a cultural region, or a government in exile. It is a fully functioning political system with elections, peaceful transfers of power, an independent judiciary, a modern military, and an economy deeply integrated into the global system. More importantly, most people on the island no longer see themselves primarily as Chinese in a political sense. They see themselves as Taiwanese, and that identity has strengthened over time, not weakened. This creates a problem Beijing cannot solve quietly. You cannot arrest a president, dissolve a parliament, or rewrite a constitution across open water without triggering international consequences. You cannot simply wait for demographics to do the work when each new generation grows more distant from the mainland. Taiwan's existence is also inseparable from foreign involvement, which touches a raw nerve in Chinese historical memory. To Beijing, American warships in the Taiwan Strait are not just a military obstacle. They are a reminder of the 19th century, when foreign powers dictated China's fate from the coast. Taiwan reopens the psychological wound of the century of humiliation in a way Xinjiang or Tibet never could, because it is a place where foreign protection visibly limits Chinese power. But the most uncomfortable reality for Beijing is that Taiwan works. It is prosperous, technologically advanced, and socially stable. It shows that a Chinese society can modernize, innovate, and thrive without Communist Party rule. That success is not propaganda. It is observable, and that makes it dangerous. Taiwan does not need to promote itself as an alternative. Its mere existence raises questions the party cannot answer without risking its own legitimacy. This is why reunification has become so closely tied to the personal legacy of leaders like Xi Jinping. By elevating Taiwan to the centerpiece of national rejuvenation, Beijing has narrowed its own options. Compromise looks like weakness. Patience looks like failure. Force looks catastrophic. Taiwan has become the one issue where history, identity, strategy, and ideology all converge. It is not just the last unresolved chapter of the Civil War. It is the mirror that reflects everything the Chinese Communist Party claims to be, and everything it fears it might not be able to control. Taiwan is often described as a territorial dispute, but that framing misses what truly makes it so dangerous. This island is where China's past, present, and future collide. It is the unresolved ending of a civil war, the most visible reminder of foreign interference in Chinese history, the strategic key that determines whether China can break out into the Pacific, and the technological hub that underpins the modern global economy. For Beijing, Taiwan is not optional. It is bound to regime legitimacy, national identity, and the promise that the Communist Party restored China's wholeness after a century of humiliation. For the United States, Taiwan is not just a distant partner. It is a test of credibility, a safeguard for critical technology, and a linchpin of the balance of power in Asia. For Taiwan itself, the situation is even more perilous. It cannot declare independence without risking war, yet it cannot accept unification without surrendering a political system most of its people trust and value. That leaves the world stuck in an uneasy equilibrium, one maintained not by peace treaties or clear guarantees, but by uncertainty and restraint. This is why Taiwan has become the most volatile flashpoint on Earth. Every year that passes strengthens Taiwanese identity, raises the stakes for Beijing, and increases the pressure on Washington to signal resolve without provoking conflict. No side can achieve its ideal outcome without triggering consequences it cannot control. History shows that wars often begin not because leaders want them, but because they believe time is running out. Taiwan sits precisely at that intersection, where patience feels like weakness, action feels like catastrophe, and delay feels increasingly unsustainable. Understanding why Taiwan matters more to China than any other territory is not just an academic exercise. It is essential to understanding where global power is headed and why the future of international stability may hinge on a small island that refuses to disappear from history.